Please stop talking. Okie dokie, welcome. Let me get the video camera doing here. We are now taping for Science of Flight, and we're actually going to be taping a whole unit on aircraft crash investigations. This is quite an unusual experience for high school students. I have been to the Air Force Flight Safety School and the British Flight Safety School, and I've done aircraft investigations actually in Europe and here in America. I really enjoy this, but it's rare that I get to teach it. The reason I'm teaching it here for fourth quarter for this Science of Flight class, as we have been through the Science of Flight book almost to the end of it, but not quite. Here, let's review exactly what we've been through so that you guys can wrap your head around. When you actually go through this aircraft investigation, I will be going through and giving you a crashed plane, literally, that you'll have to investigate. Here during this last 3 quarters, we've been through the principles of flight, why planes fly, how planes fly, how lift is generated. We've talked about what happens when lift is not generated, you crash, okay, like fly into ice or you fly too slow. We've talked about the different types of wing foils and different types of planes that generate lift. We actually went through and I guess the first quarter talked about the different types and effects of flaps on the flight and slats, spoilers. If you try to land a plane in the wrong configuration, or actually in some of these pictures, actually somebody tried to take off a plane without putting the flaps down. The larger planes have to fly slow and low and fast, and there have been some pretty famous crashes where pilots did not put out the slats or the flaps in order to take off the aircraft, and they crashed right at the end of the runway. After that, we went through different parts of weather, aviation weather. We talked about the different types of clouds. There's actually some crashes that you guys, is that Cadet Hoffman? Okay. A couple of crashes you're going to be seeing where people try to fly through clouds where they did not have the ability to do so. We actually went through a whole part of aviation weather talking about the air masses and the instability of some of the aviation fronts that come through. We talked a little bit about forecasting. And of course, the bad things that can happen to you, the ice and the turbulence and hurricanes, how that can be hazardous to flight. A couple months ago, 2 months ago, we actually went through human physiology. We talked about the expansion of the gases. Actually, we have 2 of the crashes that you guys in the investigation have to do with the physiology of the crash. The plane was actually operating perfectly well, and the humans had some issues, and they ended up crashing the plane. We talked about navigation, the history of navigation. I think I even talked about one of my classes about navigating. One guy was flying from California to Oklahoma. He flew up at 10,000 feet, saying that's fantastic. He ended up flying straight into the San Francisco peak, so he didn't navigate that well. Navigation aids, we just now are finishing a test on the different flight instrumentation, altimeter setting. We talked about setting the wrong barometric pressure in the altimeter setting, how that can mess you up on a plane, or getting disoriented with attitude indicators. Remember, I drew on the picture on the board about the different attitude indicators and some of the primitive ones, how they can actually get you messed up. So we have been over a lot in this Science of Flight class that can lead you to be able to have the basic knowledge to investigate crashes of planes. I have never investigated a civilian plane to crash. All my investigation has been military, but I'm sure everybody here, especially with the internet and the communications we have seen some of these crashes here. We even talked about the miracle in the Hudson. I think that was last time, right? We talked about the miracle Hudson of Sully being able to turn the plane into a glider. One thing I want you to look at, when you look at these pictures, just like this one here in the middle, I mean, that's a landing gear upside down in the middle of a cornfield. Can you imagine being the first person to walk on that? I mean, so yeah, you have the plane crash in the middle of your ranch out here. Where's it to say? Yeah, your ranch. Imagine 100 people in an airliner crash in the middle of your ranch up there at Williamson Valley. That would kind of ruin your day, you know. And yes, you're sitting there, but now you walk up there and you have to. There's a lot of things you can think about as an investigator when you actually walk upon a crash site like this. So let's think about that. You're the person sitting at home. And I'll tell you what, this happened to me about 4 years ago. I'm a Civil Air Patrol. Not 4 years, maybe 3 years ago. A Civil Air Patrol. I am a trained search and rescue Civil Air Patrol guy. I don't do as much as I wish I could, but I got a phone call on Saturday morning. And I actually had to go out and locate a downed aircraft. Actually, it was out Williamson Valley past Granite Mountain. And you know where Camp Wood is? Everybody heard of Camp Wood? Basically right near Camp Wood. And it was a report of a missing aircraft. So I went and flew out there with a buddy of mine in the Civil Air Patrol, and we were the first person. So here I'm flying across this wide open forest. How do you find a crashed plane?
A giant
Smoke, exactly. So I look over there and guess what? It looks like a big Boy Scout cookout, okay? I mean, lots of smoke. And I go over there and nope, that is a crashed plane. And of course, if you look at something like this, that doesn't look much like a plane. That looks like kind of a tail, and you'd have to almost look at it.
Looks like a fish.
Depending on how, yeah, it looks like a fish. Depending on how the plane's crashed, it may look in one piece, or it may look something like this. I mean, that's a tail. That's a smoking hole, okay? And so you actually have to locate the crash site, is what Civil Air Patrol people did. And of course, I looked down there and I could tell that there was no survivors. I didn't think there were any survivors. But that's the first thing you do. After you locate a crash site, what do you think is the first thing? Okay, let's say again, you're in the middle of a, well, I guess it could. You know what? I always thought about it. What flies around here all the time? Nope. Ding, ding, ding. Helicopters. Taking helicopters in and out of the hospital, which is literally, you know, not even a half a block. It's a couple hundred yards over that way. How many people ever thought about that plane helicopter crashing?
I did.
Flying over the football game, literally, or over the wide open field. So what about right over the Indian reservation? If its engine went out, or if it sucked up what do we have? Big birds, the big blackbirds or turkey vultures. If it engine sucked up a turkey bowl, it went out. Where would it land? It's looking down. It says, "Where's wide open land? Where would it land?" Football field. I'm talking 100 feet right over there is a football field. It could land right there. It's a perfect landing site for a helicopter. Not if we have our PE class out there, right? 40 or 50 people. So I'm just saying, in your mind, I'm teaching you these things, but you got to think about it that in your lifetime, y'all could be faced with these emergencies in different ways you ever would think. They are pretty incredible scenes when you talk about, look at this, a highway. Highways look like runways to people, right? And just like Sully, either you're going to nail it perfectly, no big deal. You'll sit there and have a picture of your plane right next to all the cars. That'd be really cool, right? Or you'll miss it. And it'll look something just like this. And you've wiped out a lot of civilians and a lot of people, and you go from a hero to a hero. And it's a bad scene. And guess what? You could be driving right down there and encounter that. So let's talk about this. You come up and you see a first crash. Matter of fact, that looks like a first responder picture, actually, right here. First responder, middle of the night. You're called up in the middle of the night. What's the first thing at a crash site that any kind of investigator needs to worry about? Yes, sir.
Looking for survivors?
Looking for survivors. Yes, you want to help your friend, right? Help your neighbor. Yes.
Make sure there's not like a severe fire that can blow up.
Make sure what?
That everything's not gonna like catch on fire and blow up.
Exactly. So the first thing really is survivors and safety. Write that down, guys. Safety and survivors is the first thing for any kind of crash. If it's a fire and you're going to save people, just like a house on fire, you need to make sure that you're going to protect yourself, but once the people are out, you need to protect everybody else. So let's talk about safety from these huge crashes. These are now military crashes. I don't see the one that I actually investigated. I had an F-15 and a couple F-15 actually. So you have a large crash, or there's a helicopter crash up in the hills. Actually, that looks like my friend's crash right there. That kind of looks like Arizona here. So you have a crash and you want to investigate it. What are planes made of?
Metal.
Metal. Back in the old day. Yeah, this is definitely a metal plane right here, okay? What are planes made of nowadays? Aluminum, plastic, we're getting there. Titanium, yes, it's actually, the term is composites, okay? So if you're sitting at your ranch or your house or whatever, and you see this picture right here, an F-15 or an F-16 crashing in your front yard, and oh, by the way, you look, and of course you're a trained investigator, I'm training you in high school, and you see a F-16, and you see one parachute floating down, and he flops right there, then what are you thinking? Good or bad?
Bad. Where's the other head?
Yeah, exactly. F-16 could have 2 seats. You're right. Maybe 2. But you run over there and you go, hey, was anybody else with you? He goes, no, I'm the only one. So what are you going to do with the crash? Protect it, set up perimeter, safety, right? There's nobody in that crash. Let it burn. And oh, by the way, in almost any of these pictures I've shown you, certainly the big civilian pictures, there are very, very hazardous materials on these planes. When plastic burns, can you just love there and smell the plastic? Does that make you healthy? How much plastic do you think is on this plane right here that's burning up on the runway?
A little bit.
And that's the least of the problem, is burning plastic. Burning composite fibers is just as bad as, you don't know about it, you inhale the fibers, it can give you cancer and respiratory problems years in the future. So you always want to be upwind from this, and just because there's a fire going on there doesn't mean we go over there and roast marshmallows or whatever. We get away from it, we secure the area, and I'm telling you, if you're remote or if you're camping or I'm telling you, if anybody will go out and hunt or camp out in the woods, you could have this happen in Arizona. What's flying all over us all the time in Arizona?
Bugs.
Civilian planes, and what's in Luke Air Force Base? Luke Air Force Base. F-16s. F-16s. Luke Air Force Base is the largest training schoolhouse in the nation. I don't know about the world. Certainly the nation. F-16s, they fly low level, 500 feet, 500 miles an hour, all over northern Arizona. What happens if the turkey vulture goes down there one engine?
Bad day.
All of a sudden they're starting to have a lawn dart, and you're hoping to see a floating pilot float away. So you guys could be out camping or whatever. You could easily be a first responder, not without any knowledge. So secure the site, make sure the person's who's coming down is okay, but don't go running over there near the plane. You got to secure it. Wait for the professionals. Ideally, with, like you said, some of these planes, what if they have an oxygen cylinder on there?
Blow up.
And you heat that sucker up, what's going to happen? Kaboom! We're talking secondary explosions. That's not good for an aircraft investigator. Okay? So a lot of times there will be other harmful materials on board this. So the same scenario we just said, helicopter, over, it comes in and out of here, golly, 2 or 3, 4 times a day sometime. Aircraft turns off, his engine turns off, he sucks in one of these big blackbirds around here, he lands on the field, and you see him land and everybody runs away. What is everybody else going to do?
Run away.
You need to keep your friends away. You're not going to go over there and just, wow, this is really cool, burning helicopter. You think a medical helicopter doesn't have oxygen on board? God, boom! I mean, wipe you out. It's going to happen. So you need to stay away. And then, of course, wait for appropriate authorities. Okay, you're going to wait for cops, security, firemen, right? And they basically, what they do is they secure the area of an aircraft and absolutely let it burn out until it's burned out. Because if it's on fire, you're not going to investigate anything when it's on fire. You're going to wait till it burns out. There actually was the China mishap recently in San Diego?
Korean.
What was it, Korean?
I think it was Korean.
Korean. They had to let that thing burn. I mean, for a day or two. Remember, they just left it on the runway. It was burning because they don't want to come anywhere near it. So that's kind of the initial response is, of course, to save lives, but then establish a perimeter and be safe. The way we're going to go around this, the aircraft investigation, why are we investigating crashes? Why do we investigate crashes?
To find out how it crashed.
Why do you care how it crashed?
So you can.
Make sure nothing illegal happened.
Nothing illegal, good point. What else?
So you can prevent future crashes.
Prevention. Write that down. Prevention is the reason we have aircraft investigation. We don't ever want to repeat a mistake. If a plane was designed improperly and a nut or bolt was rubbing against a electrical wire and it chafed, it rubbed off the rubber and it started to spark and it took down the plane, guess what? That could happen to any plane in the fleet. That is kind of the holy grail, is you want to keep any other planes from crashing, other people from dying. So mishap prevention is the reason for aircraft crash investigation. When do we do this? When do we do the aircraft investigation?
Fire zone.
When it's safe. You're exactly right. When it's safe. And then these are two little different techniques or different ways things happen. In America, they're basically the military investigations or they're FAA investigations. FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. So when we have a crash, like you said, the Korean plane in San Francisco was a recent famous one. How long does it take for them to figure out what went wrong?
Depends on
Everything's quick, couple days?
a couple of months, years, weeks.
What do you think?
A week or two.
The Korean?
Yeah. Have y'all heard what went wrong there?
Took like a couple hours.
A couple hours?
What happened?
A plane coming to America from Asia crashed at the front of the runway there in San Francisco. It got too low and tried to pull up, and it basically splattered across the runway. And it didn't kill that many people, killed 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, one of the girls got ran over by the fire truck.
Yeah, it got run over. That's exactly. That's what was the theory.
She survived.
The difference, these are the differences. The FAA investigation, guys, that you see on TV and CNN takes at least 1 year. 1 year to find out what went wrong. Matter of fact, just yesterday, over the weekend, the FAA released an investigation on a UPS crash in North Carolina. Was it North Carolina, Alabama?
Or south.
Where the plane just crashed short of the runway. And they said the pilots were fatigued. And they've been complaining about fatiguing and texting and tell their parents fatigue, meaning crazy hours, messing up your circadian rhythms, flying at night, flying the day the next time. And now this, a year later, they actually have the official report. Why does it take a year for an official report that's going on CNN to be on TV?
Because I want to be correct.
Because, yes, lots of lawsuits, right? Lots of lawsuits. The definition of lawsuit. Your mom and daddy dies on a plane that a pilot screws up, there's going to be lawsuits, right? So the FAA investigation is the official American statement as to why the planes crash. Military-wise, I sit here and say, United States Air Force Guide to Military Investigation, okay, is the Air Force ever going to be sued?
No, sir.
If I'm a pilot in the Air Force, and the Air Force sent me up in a plane that wasn't safe, and I crashed, can my wife sue the Air Force?
No, sir.
No, there is a law that says that if Cadet Johnson is driving in an Air Force truck and it breaks and he gets killed, he can't sue, his family can't sue. You cannot sue the military for her being hurt or being killed. It doesn't exist. So when you're talking about Air Force investigations, the Air Force investigations are much shorter. They're not a year long. They're 30 days. And it's very, very intense and hardcore. You have to, in 30 days, finish your entire investigation that it takes a year for the civilians to do.
What if something illegal happened, though?
Well, that's a great question. Remember, write that down and ask me later on. Probably next time I'll tell you all about illegal stuff, okay? But the bottom line with Air Force investigations, it takes one 30-day period, and guess what? You work 12 and 18-hour days for 30 days, and you're done. And I've done that. And at the 30th day point, you're actually out briefing to the general who owned the plane or whose responsibility it was. And I'm telling you, it's quite interesting to do a briefing where you look at the general and says, your people caused this accident. They killed him. And that's part of the, because there's no litigation, there's no lawsuits. It's absolutely very blunt talking. And you come up with something called findings, causes, and recommendations. Write that down. Findings, causes, and recommendations is the results of the mishap in the crash investigation report. So we talked about what and when, and now I'm going to talk about how. Findings, causes, and recommendations. Okay, so if our purpose in a mishap investigation is to prevent any other crashes, our findings is defined as sequential steps as to what happened. Okay? The pilot, and it starts at the beginning of the entire mishap sequences. Mishaps and accidents, just like you guys think about yourself having a car accident, or name an accident, or a shooting accident, or even cutting your finger, or getting in trouble, or breaking your leg on a trampoline or something, acting crazy. Any kind of mishap or accident happens in a sequence of events that, if the theory goes, one of those mishap sequences, the findings are taken out, you wouldn't have broken your leg. You wouldn't have been in the car wreck. And that is kind of the way the aircraft mishap investigations also done. These findings can be, starting back, the plane was designed incorrectly. 20 years later, the bolt started rubbing against the live wires and causing a spark, an electrical connection. It could be like that. Or the pilots drank to excess and were drunk the night before. And they flew, they ignored, FAA rules and flew the next morning when they were still under the effects of alcohol. That can be the findings. The findings are a listing in order, in sequence, of everything that happened. The findings do not say the pilot caused the plane crash because he didn't see the mountain. But it may be the pilot was flying in the clouds without a radar or without researching the minimum obstruction clearance, where the mountains were. Or the pilot changed his route and started to fly over higher terrain than he thought about. So the findings are a sequential, one after another statement of fact. Write that down. A finding is a statement of fact about the sequence of events for the mishap. A statement of fact of a sequence of mishaps for the event. It is not your opinion that the pilot drank too much. It would be documented. The pilot drank too much. He had 7 beers in 2 hours. The bartender, said it. It's not your opinion. The findings are not opinions. They are facts. And they can be anywhere from 6 of them to 20 of them. I don't care. This is going to be y'all's responsibility for your crashes. They may be right out of this book. The pilot failed to look at the weather and had a cold front come in with bad weather and flew into a tornado. That would be a dumb thing. Flew into icing, unknown icing, and the icing then caused the crash. Okay, causes. The causes for a crash is the finding, the 1 or 2 findings that if you remove from the sequence would have eliminated the crash. So the cause is really your opinion. Remember, findings are facts. Causes is the board's opinion. It's just not one of you guys. It's the entire board, the mishap investigation board, getting together and saying, you know what? If those pilots from UPS had gotten more sleep, if they hadn't been scheduled, to fly 8 times in 3 days, I think, honestly, by board's opinion, that there wouldn't have been a crash. So, the cause is 1 or 2 of the findings that if you remove that fact from the sequence, there would have not been a crash. I was in a rush this morning to get to school. I was trying to hold my coffee cup at the same time the phone rang and the kid yelled in the back of the car, and guess what? I ran a stop sign and I got in a crash. One of those findings, being in a rush, or my kid crying in the back and me turning around, keep in mind, one of those findings, if I replace that, would have been the cause. So now you have 1 or 2 causes from the findings, and those causes are exactly what caused the accident. Recommendations are how to fix the cause so it will never happen again. Recommendations are how you, the board, recommends how you think we should fix the cause so that it will never happen again. Do you have a pencil and paper? Okay. So, the recommendations, you need to have 1 recommendation for every cause. Do you need to have 1 cause for every finding? No. You can have 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 up here. You'll have 1 or 2, and you'll have 1 or 2. Because the recommendations fix the causes. The board recommends that all UPS pilots be limited to 12 hours of work in a 24-hour period. The board recommends that any UPS pilots that feel fatigued can not fly, without repercussion on their career. Because those guys were flying, I think, and could have caused a problem. So these are the results of the board. This is what you guys will be briefing and talking online for your peers to evaluate you for your 4th quarter project. Okay? All righty. Any questions so far? Yes, sir. Set? Okay, the way ahead, and I even put it out here, is we're gonna hold off here in a minute or 2. This is the end of what, when, and how for aircraft investigation. Tomorrow, we're going to go over how you organize yourself, the Safety Investigation Board, what are the different members, and we're also going to go over how exactly do you investigate the accident. How do you find the findings? How do you determine the findings and what went wrong with the mishap?
Wednesday.
The next time we talk, yes. And then I'm going to go over exactly what a report looks like of finding cause recommendations. I have some examples, and we'll talk about the assignment. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question about the SAL application, sir.
We're not talking about that right now. Okay, let's conclude this, and I will be seeing